The planet Virolith shimmered like glass beneath its twin suns, a world of beauty untouched by sorrow. Its people, the Valari, were a race of perfection. They did not age, did not suffer illness, and most of all, they did not feel pain. To them, pain was a concept from primitive ages, something they had evolved beyond. They had never known the sting of loss or the ache of a broken limb. To them, pain was inefficiency, unnecessary, a relic of lesser species. Among them was Lyra, a young xenobiologist who had never once cried, never once bled. Her pale blue skin glowed faintly under the twin suns, her calm silver eyes reflecting an endless calm. She had studied countless species across the stars, fascinated by the differences of form and behavior. Yet one species puzzled her more than all the rest: humans. They were strange, fragile, emotional creatures. They bruised, they broke, they wept, and yet they endured. The Valari Council had long dismissed humanity as volatile and primitive. But Lyra disagreed. Something about them seemed deeper. When the Council announced a research exchange program with the humans of Earth, Lyra volunteered instantly. Her colleagues found it amusing. "You'll learn nothing from them," they said with soft laughter. "Pain has blinded their kind for centuries." But Lyra was curious, and curiosity, even among the Valari, was a force of nature. She arrived on Earth on a cool morning, stepping out of a silver vessel onto human soil for the first time. The air was thicker here, filled with scent, sound, and imperfection. Rain fell softly, and she stared in quiet awe at the water sliding down her arm. Her human counterpart introduced himself with a warm smile. "Dr. Mason Reed," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Earth." She studied the gesture. Contact was unusual among her kind. Still, she mirrored it. His skin was warm, alive in a way she had never felt before. Over the next weeks, Lyra studied everything she could about humanity, their art, their medicine, their history. And with every passing day, Mason grew fascinated not by her intelligence, but by her calm detachment. "You talk about pain like it's a disease," he said one evening as they watched the sunset through the lab's glass dome. "It is," Lyra replied softly. "Pain limits function. It weakens the mind. Your species should have evolved past it." Mason smiled faintly. "Maybe, but pain also teaches us. It's what makes us care. You can't understand love or courage or sacrifice without it." Lyra tilted her head, studying him as if he were a rare specimen. "You believe suffering creates meaning?" "I don't believe," Mason said. "I know." The words stayed with her long after he left the room. For the first time, something stirred within her, but not pain, but curiosity that cut deeper than science. Days passed. They worked together on joint experiments, studying neural regeneration and the suppression of pain signals. Then, during one late-night test, something went wrong. A power surge snapped through the lab and a piece of broken metal flew across the room. Lyra turned too late and it cut across her arm. She gasped, a sharp burning sensation racing up her nerves like fire. She froze, staring at the crimson blood blooming from the wound. Her voice trembled for the first time in her life. "What is this?" Mason rushed forward, pressing a cloth to her arm. "That," he said quietly, "is pain." And for the first time, the alien who never knew pain felt alive. Lyra sat in silence long after the bleeding had stopped. Her arm was bandaged, her pulse erratic. The sterile lights of the lab hummed faintly, but to her ears it was a storm. Everything felt too loud. She could still feel it. That sharp echo beneath her skin, the memory of burning heat that refused to fade. It wasn't just physical. It was deeper. Like her body had discovered a hidden world it was never meant to know. Mason watched her from across the room, unsure whether to speak. He had seen soldiers wounded, children crying, people broken, but never had he seen someone so terrified by a single drop of pain. "You're shaking," he said softly. "I don't understand it," Lyra whispered. Her voice trembled, each word fragile. "The sensation. It invaded me. It hurt." "That's what pain does," Mason said, stepping closer. "It demands to be felt." She turned her silver eyes toward him. "But why would evolution allow such cruelty? Why not remove it? Why would any being choose to endure this?" Mason hesitated. How could he explain centuries of human struggle? The countless lessons carved through suffering. He took a slow breath. "Because pain teaches us where our limits are," he said, "and sometimes it teaches us how to go beyond them." Lyra looked down at her trembling hand, flexing her fingers. The bandage was already stained faintly red, a color she had only seen in human art. Now, it was hers. "It feels like weakness," she murmured. "It feels like being alive," Mason corrected gently. For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of the machines filled the air, steady and soft. Then Lyra said, almost to herself, "If this is what it means to live as you do, I don't know if I can bear it." Mason gave a small, sympathetic smile. "No one can bear pain forever. We just learn to carry it and make it mean something." The following days were uneasy. Lyra could no longer focus as before. Every brush of wind against her skin reminded her of that first cut. Every heartbeat seemed heavier, every sound sharper. Her colleagues back on Virolith contacted her through holographic link, curious about the incident. When she explained what had happened, their faces shifted between disbelief and pity. "You were contaminated," one said. "Pain is chaos, Lyra," said another. "Purge it before it consumes you." But she didn't. Some part of her couldn't let it go. The memory of Mason's words, his eyes filled with something she had never seen in her own species, compassion born of shared struggle, haunted her. One evening, she walked alone beneath the rain again. The droplets struck her skin like tiny sparks, cold and sharp, and she did not retreat. She lifted her hand, watching a single raindrop slide over the faint scar on her arm. The sensation was subtle, almost tender, and she realized pain wasn't only destruction, it was connection. For the first time, Lyra wondered if her people had lost something precious when they cast pain aside. When she returned to the lab, Mason was waiting. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes softer now, carrying something new, understanding. "I think," she said slowly, "I am beginning to learn what it means to be human." And in that moment, Mason saw it, the faintest human emotion flickering behind alien eyes. Weeks passed. The wound on Lyra's arm had long since healed, but something inside her had not. It lingered, invisible, persistent, alive. She felt things now, not just physical sensations, but echoes. When she saw a child fall and scrape their knee outside the research dome, she flinched. When she heard Mason laugh, warmth fluttered through her chest. When she watched the news of a disaster in a faraway city, her throat tightened. Her mind, once perfect and precise, began to feel heavy. Her colleagues noticed it during their regular reports to the Valari Council. "Lyra," one said, her tone sharp, "you appear distracted. Your productivity metrics have fallen." "I am observing," Lyra replied carefully. "There are elements of human behavior that cannot be recorded in numbers." The council members looked at one another. "Your duty is scientific, not sentimental. Do not lose yourself to primitive impulses." Primitive impulses. The words burned. After the call ended, Lyra stood alone in the quiet lab, staring at her reflection in the glass. She looked the same, calm, composed, the model of Valari serenity, yet she no longer recognized herself. Behind her reflection, Mason appeared, holding 2 mugs of something steaming. "You look like someone who's been lectured," he said with a small grin. Lyra didn't smile. "They think I am broken." He handed her a mug. "Maybe you're just changing." She stared at the swirling liquid. Hot chocolate, he called it. Its warmth seeped through the cup into her hands. She found the sensation grounding, comforting. "Mason," she said after a pause, "how do you live with pain?" He thought for a moment. "We don't live with it. We live through it. Every scar, every mistake, and it shapes who we are. It's not the pain that defines us, but what we do because of it." Lyra considered this. "So what pain creates meaning?" "Sometimes," Mason said quietly. "Sometimes it's just there to remind us we're still alive." That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. The words circled in her mind, mixing with memories of her own kind's perfect, painless existence. Was that perfection or emptiness? In the following days, she began recording her own private logs, forbidden by Valari protocol. In them, she spoke not of data, but of feeling. "Pain has color," she said softly into the recorder. "It shades everything differently. It makes the world heavier, but somehow more real. The humans fear it, yet they do not run from it. They grow because of it. Is that weakness or strength?" One evening, Mason found her sitting alone on the observation deck, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun dipped below the clouds, painting the sky in gold and crimson. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Mason said, leaning beside her. "It hurts to look at," she whispered. He smiled. "Then it's working." She turned to him, puzzled. "Working? When beauty hurts, it means your heart's waking up." She said nothing, Idris, but inside her something shifted. Later that night, Lyra sent one last message to the Valari Council. "I have learned something the data cannot measure," she said. "Pain is not weakness. It is the bridge between isolation and empathy. Perhaps we have not evolved beyond it. Perhaps we have merely forgotten its purpose." She ended the message before they could reply, and for the first time, Lyra felt something she had no word for. The quiet ache of standing between two worlds. The message came at dawn. A soft chime woke Lyra from uneasy dreams. The holographic seal of the Valari Council shimmered above her desk, its silver light casting long shadows across the room. "Lyra of Virilith," the voice intoned, smooth and cold. "You are hereby ordered to return immediately. Your conduct on Earth has raised concern regarding contamination. Your research access is suspended pending evaluation." Then the message ended. Simple, final. Lyra stood still for a long time, the words echoing in the air. She had expected questions, not exile. When Mason entered the lab later that morning, he found her packing. The sight stopped him. "You're leaving?" he asked. Lyra's movements were calm, but her voice trembled faintly. "The council has recalled me. They believe I have been compromised. Because you felt pain? Because I understood it," she said softly. Mason stepped closer. "You don't have to go, you know. You could stay here. The research team would protect you." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "And what then, Mason?" "I would live as an alien among humans, never fully either." He opened his mouth to reply, but she raised a hand. "Do not pity me. I chose this path. Curiosity always has a cost." Still, there was a flicker of something behind her composure, a weight that hadn't been there before. Over the next hours, they finished the formal shutdown of the joint lab. The sterile hum of machines filled the silence between them, punctuated only by the occasional sound of glassware being packed away. At one point, Mason caught her staring out the window, eyes distant. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. Lyra hesitated, then said, "On Virilith, I never noticed the wind. Our cities are sealed, climate-controlled. Everything is still. Here the air moves. It changes, touches, reminds." Mason smiled gently. "You'll miss it." "I already do." They said little else after that. The day passed into evening, the lab lights dimming one last time. Outside, the sky turned violet. When the transport shuttle arrived, its sleek frame gleaming beneath the stars, Lyra felt her throat tighten. She turned to Mason. "There is no translation in your language for what I wish to say," she murmured. "But it means gratitude mixed with sorrow." Mason nodded slowly. "Then I understand." He reached out his hand again, the same gesture from their first meeting. This time she took it without hesitation. Her skin was cool against his warmth, her eyes reflecting the shuttle's silver glow. "I once thought touch was unnecessary," she said. "Now I see it as another form of language." When she stepped onto the transport, the door sealed behind her with a quiet hiss. Mason watched as it rose into the night, leaving only a streak of light against the dark. Inside the vessel, Lyra sat in silence, her fingers brushing the faint scar on her arm. She felt the old sting return, not from the wound, but from something deeper. As the stars blurred past, she whispered into the empty air, "Pain connects. And I am connected now, to a world that will never be mine." Back on Earth, Mason stood beneath the stars until the light faded completely. He didn't know if he'd ever see her again, but in that stillness he realized she had already left something behind. An idea, fragile yet powerful, that even among the stars, pain could be the seed of understanding. The capital of Virilith gleamed beneath a silver sky. Towers of crystal rose like frozen rivers, their reflections forming endless patterns of light. To most Valari, this world was paradise, pure, ordered, eternal. But to Lyra, returning here felt like stepping into silence after hearing music for the first time. The shuttle landed on a smooth, glass-like platform. As she stepped out, dozens of eyes turned toward her, calm, unfeeling, curious. The air was sterile, filtered. No wind, no scent, no imperfection. Lyra's heart, if it could be called that, felt heavy. Inside the Hall of Concord, the Volari Council awaited her. 7 figures stood behind a curved table of light, their features serene, their eyes shining with pale intelligence. Lyra of Virolith, the central figure, began, voice calm as still water. You stand before us accused of violating the purity edict by subjecting yourself to primitive biological contamination. Lyra bowed slightly. I acknowledge the incident. It was unintentional. And yet, another counselor said, you continued to study this sensation. You even recorded personal reflections. You speak of pain as though it were sacred. It is not sacred, Lyra said softly. It is real. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The word real, so small yet so heavy, seemed to disturb the tranquil air. The lead counselor's gaze hardened. Pain is chaos. It is the root of violence, of despair, of weakness. Our evolution removed it so that reason could reign. Would you undo that? Lyra hesitated, then lifted her arm, showing the faint scar. This wound hurt. It frightened me. But in that pain I felt something your reason cannot give. Empathy. I understood another being's suffering. I saw meaning in imperfection. You speak like them, another counselor hissed. Like a human. Lyra met his gaze without fear. Perhaps that is not an insult. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. You were sent to observe, not to be changed, the lead counselor said coldly. You have endangered the purity of Volari thought. Tell us, Lyra. What has pain taught you that logic could not? Lyra drew a slow breath, her voice steady though her chest trembled. It taught me that to live without pain is to live without depth. We know balance but not compassion, harmony but not kindness. Perfection has made us hollow. One of the younger counselors shifted uneasily. You believe the humans are superior? No, Lyra said. They are fragile, broken in many ways, but their flaws bind them together. They feel pain, and because of it they choose to protect one another. That choice gives their lives meaning. A long silence followed. The counselors exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the lead counselor spoke. You have been touched by infection. We will restore you. The memory of pain will be erased. Lyra's chest tightened. You would erase what I have learned? We will preserve your knowledge, he said, but not your corruption. Guards approached, their faces serene, their steps soundless. Lyra stood motionless for a heartbeat, her pulse echoing like thunder in her ears, a sound no Volari was meant to hear. Then she spoke one last time. If you take this from me, you erase not just pain but understanding. I beg you, do not blind yourselves to what makes life more than function. Her plea fell into the silence of the hall. No one answered. As they led her away, Lyra looked up toward the ceiling, a dome of perfect glass reflecting her pale face. In that reflection she saw not purity but emptiness, and for the first time she wondered if perfection was the true disease. They took her to the Chamber of Renewal, a vast circular room bathed in soft blue light. Every surface shimmered with purity, sterile and flawless. In the center stood the cleansing core, a sphere of white energy that hummed like a distant heartbeat. It was meant to heal, to restore, to erase. Lyra stood before it, her hands bound in light restraints that pulsed with gentle force. She did not struggle. Her heart, in that strange, restless rhythm she had come to know on Earth, beat fast, wild, alive. A voice echoed from the speakers above. This procedure will remove all traces of emotional corruption. You will be restored to clarity. Clarity, she whispered bitterly. You mean emptiness? No answer came. The light around her grew brighter. Images flickered in her mind. Mason's smile, the sound of rain, the ache in her arm, the warmth of touch. They weren't just memories. They were proof of something greater than perfection. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, Don't let them take this from you. And somewhere, as if the universe heard her, a voice broke through the static of the intercom. Lyra, can you hear me? Her eyes widened. Mason? The guards looked up, startled. The voice continued, clearer now. I tapped into the transmission relay. They're trying to wipe you. You have to fight it. How did you? She began, but the voice cut through again. You showed me how your tech links thought and matter. I can send a feedback loop, but you have to want to keep it. The core can't erase what you refuse to surrender. The guards moved to disable the signal, but Lyra's gaze locked on the glowing core. Her fear twisted into resolve. She took a breath, deep, grounding, and reached inward toward the thing her people had abandoned long ago. Will. As the light surrounded her, pain erupted through her nerves like wildfire. It was worse than before, a raw, searing, unending. Every instinct screamed to submit, to let the core take it away. But she remembered Mason's words. Pain demands to be felt. So she didn't run. She felt every heartbeat became defiance. Every pulse of pain a reminder that she was still alive. The light grew violent, crackling around her. Systems overloaded, sparks bursting across the walls. The guards fell back, shielding their eyes. Stop the process. Someone shouted, but it was too late. The core's light flared, then shattered. A wave of energy rippled outward, extinguishing every panel in the chamber. Silence. Smoke. The faint smell of ozone. When the haze cleared, Lyra stood unbound. The restraints lay in pieces at her feet. Her body trembled, her eyes glowing faintly gold instead of silver, touched by something her species had forgotten. Over the comm, Mason's voice returned, breathless. "Lyra, are you okay?" She smiled weakly. "It hurts," she whispered. "But it's beautiful." "Then you did it," Mason said softly. Alarms began to blare in the distance. The council would come soon, but Lyra didn't feel fear. Not anymore. She stepped forward, hand pressed to her heart. "They'll never understand," she said. "But maybe, one day they'll feel it too." Mason's voice was quiet now, almost reverent. "What will you do?" Lyra looked toward the distant horizon, where the glass towers of Virolith shimmered like fragile truth. "I will remind them," she said, "that even perfection must learn to bleed." And with that she walked out of the broken chamber, carrying pain like a torch. The halls of the Valari citadel burned with warning lights. For the first time in centuries, disorder rippled through perfection. Alarms cried out like echoes of a heartbeat, a sound no Valari had ever heard before. Lyra walked through the chaos unhurried, her steps steady despite the tremors beneath her feet. Her arms still ached from the overload, every breath sharp with pain, but she welcomed it. It grounded her, reminded her she was alive. Behind her, the chamber of renewal lay in ruin, its cleansing light extinguished. Ahead, the council awaited. She entered the Hall of Concord once more. The 7 counselors stood in silence as she approached, their once serene faces clouded by something unfamiliar, fear. "Lyra," the lead counselor said, his voice trembling just slightly. "What have you done?" Lyra stopped at the center of the chamber. "I remembered what we forgot. You have infected the core," another accused. "You've endangered the stability of all Valari systems." Lyra looked up toward the vaulted ceiling of glass where the twin suns gleamed. "Stability without meaning is emptiness," she said. "We have built a paradise without life in it. I have seen what it means to feel, and I will not go back to shadows." "Emotion is chaos," the lead counselor insisted. Lyra stepped closer. "No, it is creation. Without pain we do not grow. Without loss we do not value what we have. We were never perfect. We were simply afraid." The council chamber fell silent. Some of the younger members glanced at one another, uncertain, shaken. Then one of them, a woman with eyes like molten silver, spoke softly. "You say you have felt. Show us then. What is it you defend?" Lyra hesitated and then raised her hand. Slowly, she drew a thin blade of her research tool across her palm. A shallow cut bloomed red against blue skin. Gasps filled the hall. No Valari had seen blood in living memory. Lyra's voice trembled, but her gaze never wavered. "This hurts. It is weakness and strength at once. It reminds me that I exist on and that others do too. You cannot learn compassion from comfort." She looked at them, eyes shining with quiet fire. "Pain connects. It is the thread between isolation and understanding. I was blind, until a human showed me that even in suffering there is beauty." The council stood frozen. Some recoiled. Others stared in awe. No one spoke. Then, without another word, Lyra turned and walked from the chamber. Outside, the sterile air of Virolith was changing. The city's perfect hum now carried a subtle vibration, whispers of emotion spreading through the neural network that bound all Valari minds. Lyra's resistance had released something deeper than data, feeling. Across the planet, Valari paused in their routines. Some felt a strange heaviness in their chests. Others wept without knowing why. The world that had forgotten pain began to remember life. Lyra stood on a high balcony overlooking the crystalline plains, the twin suns glimmering above her. She raised her face to their light and whispered, "Mason, it worked." Light years away, on Earth, Mason sat alone in the quiet of his lab. The communication relay blinked once, and a faint pulse of silver and gold, and he smiled. "She did it," he murmured. In the stillness, he thought of her. The alien who once believed pain was a flaw, and who had become something greater, a bridge between worlds. And though galaxies separated them, both looked to the same stars and felt the same truth. That pain, shared and understood, was not a curse. It was the heart of being alive.